Greetings, YouTube. The other day when I did my discussion on villains, I realized I forgot probably my favorite villain I ever used of all time, and that would be Duke Gunduhar. Now, Gunduhar was a hill giant, and when he was 8 or 9 years old, an evil wizard, an alcoholic evil wizard, that's important later, abducted him and brought him to his tower. The wizard wanted some muscle around and figured if he got a hill giant young, he'd be able to train him and have essentially a servant that would be useful to him. And the reality is, even being essentially the slave of a drunken wizard was better than being raised in a clan of evil hill giants. So things didn't go too badly for Gunduhar. It didn't hurt that Gunduhar was slightly more intelligent. I think Pathfinder hill giants have a 6 intelligence. Gunduhar's was like an 8, and their wisdom is like a 10. But Gunduhar had like a 12 or a 13, so he was wiser and brighter than your average hill giant. And one of the things that he eventually ended up doing was being in charge of the goon squad of this particular wizard. His name doesn't matter. He doesn't really play much of a part at the end of the story. I don't think I ever named him because, well, you'll find out why. And as part of the goon squad, or the head of the goon squad, he would go out and he would tax the countryside. People traveling, villages, what have you. And he would then bring the booty home to the wizard, who was his master. Well, things like this went on for, 10 or 12 years. And things were going quite well. The wizard was making quite a nice, tidy profit. He was able to keep himself well stocked in alcohol. But one day he got a little careless. And he passed out in a drunken stupor somewhere other than inside his secure home. Well, Gunduhar pondered this for a moment, looking at the wizard lying there helpless in front of him, and realized, if I didn't have the wizard around, I could have all the treasure. And then he crushed the wizard's skull with his favorite two-handed mace. And, well, he couldn't move into the tower. It was geared for a human, so he went out and just started camping in the courtyard. And that's where his goon squad became his particular gang. And that is what Gunduhar proceeded to become, a gang leader, a very effective one. But at some point, he waylaid some nobles. Now, one thing that the wizard had taught Gunduhar that had really stuck in his head is that if you killed someone, you got to take their stuff once. But if you just rob them blind and let them live, you can potentially rob them again and again and again. And Gunduhar really liked that idea. Of course, he would occasionally kill people just, for fun and for food, and to make sure that his reputation stayed hot. But one day he waylaid a noble and his baggage train, and this noble was a duke. And that term really stuck in Gunduhar's head. He liked the sound of that word, duke. So he became Duke Gunduhar. And no one was really going to question that Gunduhar was a duke. Enter the player characters in the campaign. The campaign started out as a 2-person game with 2 players, each with a single character. One was a fighter, one was a rogue. Back in this 2nd edition, were they still called thieves back in 2nd edition? I can't remember. Kind of styling himself after the thief from the original Conan the Barbarian. Wanted to be stealthy and an archer and such. Was very bad at everything he did. I've mentioned this guy before. He's the one that did really stupid things repeatedly until he got himself killed after picking up a quote-unquote girl in the headquarters of the local crime lord who he turned down for membership. Yeah, he wasn't smart. And these two decided they didn't want to be members of their particular organized crime group up north in a mining town. Well, it really wasn't much of an organized crime group. It was more just a gang that was, working over the miners and the local suppliers of the miners. So they decided we don't want to be hired muscle anymore, so we're going to strike out on our own. So they took off, and that's where the campaign started. Them leaving their mining town and heading south to larger and bigger things with kind of a Fafrid Grey Mouser concept in mind. I think that was their idea. And I let him have a simple encounter, which that was fine. And the second encounter they had was Duke Gunduhar. Now remember, these are first level characters. They really couldn't stop Gunduhar from just robbing them of everything they owned except the clothing on their backs. And then he sent them on the way. And he was very pleasant about the whole process. It really pissed them off. Well, they eventually went on to become real heroes, or at least one of them did, and become quite powerful. And all the while this is going on, Duke Gunduhar had expanded his operation, getting larger and larger numbers of people to follow him, and eventually getting some hill giants to join up when they realized that this guy actually has some smarts and is a very good leader. And we can't let all these non-hill giants have a hill giant leader. We should join as well. And eventually he set up his own steading, and I used the G1 module, the hill giant module from the back in second edition. I used that module as the steading that he had. And he got so good that he was actually cutting off parts of the kingdom from the rest so that he could essentially milk them for money. And he was taxing caravans going through. The mining town was cut off. And he was becoming a major pain to a lot of people. But he was in an out-of-way place. They were currently at war, so they really couldn't afford the time and effort to go and take care of this guy. So what did they do? They got the player character group, which was at that point known as the Companions of the Crystal Star, I believe, to go north and take care of Gunduhar and his stalwart companions and followers. And they did. They eventually, they were probably 10 or 12th level, I think, when they finally got to that stage in the campaign. And they finally went up there, took on Gunduhar and all his droogs. And of course, they did eventually defeat him. But it was a tough adventure for them. It wasn't easy in the least. But I loved Gunduhar. I've never had a chance to use him again, but I would in a heartbeat. He was just a lot of fun. He was always very pleasant to everyone, even the people he was killing, even when he tortured them for fun. He always had a sunny disposition. It was very unnerving for most people. So that's Duke Gunduhar, quite possibly my favorite villain. So I'm always looking for new ideas, so if you hadn't told me in the last thread about villains, your favorite villain, I'm still looking for more information on them. I'm sure that I and Mandarin are always interested in hearing what you have to say.